This is where I'm going to paint this morning. Well, it's just turned afternoon actually. I'm in Harrold, in this little market square here. Nice structure, and the lock-up in the background. I don't know if you can see that. Little conical building there just to the right of this tree. So I'm going to have a go at this morning. Well, here I've ready to start, and as you can see I've sketched out our scene, just a rough light. I hope you can see that. I can just about see it. I've had to detach the noise. We had a lot of wind noise. I have to get a wind protected mic, but it's just a bit too much rumbling and racket, so I've detached that. So as of here, I'm just about to prepare this sky wash. I'm using a Daleroni pocket set, really, all plein air. Very nice, intense paints they are actually. So I've got to make a nice puddle and just dap it in here. It wasn't particularly vivid sky, although the sun was bright at times, keep popping out. A typical sort of spring, but rather cold morning. But I'm dropping in something here, coming down just about to the roof line, and big trees here on the right, so I'm avoiding those. Left and right, I've got a big tree. So just dabbing in a little bit here, trying to keep the edges soft. And yes, I decided I ought to lift a little bit of sky out, a bit of the blue out, to leave a little bit of the a few cloud formations which we'll see behind our trees. So I have to keep some lightness, as it will emphasize the nature of the boughs of the trees, which I wanted to do, as there's not a lot of leaf on the trees at this time of the year, so they stand out better if you've got a fairly lightish sky. So here I'm just stroking in gently with a bit of tissue. You don't want to push it too hard or make a big blob of it, because it can soak out too much of the colour. So I'm just gently tickling the surface of that, which will give us a nice broken sky with the clouds scudding across. Next, I think I'm out to do the front of these buildings. Yes, there's a row of cottages behind this old market structure here. I don't know the technical term for it, but a very ancient market, a little covered building there. So I'm just mixing up colour now. I think it will be, was kind of limestone, so I want to get something a bit yellowish from the front of these buildings. And you'll notice that looks very, very red, very yellow, very bright. And I put that on and think, oh no, it's too much. But you've got to always remember with watercolour, it will try it probably at least 50% lighter. And as you'll see later, when we come towards the end of the painting, the things will be quite a lot lighter. So, as I said, the yellow ochre in front of this building is quite bright at the moment. but when I put a little bit of blue or umber, it'll dull down, and you'll see when we look at it at the end, it's quite muted and reads a lot more real. So don't be too alarmed when you put in a bright colour in watercolour. I think it's just a question of experience, and the more you do it, you realise there's a big time element with watercolour, knowing when to put the colours in, and when it's wet in wet, you can drop little bits of different colours in, and the watercolour makes a nice diffusion of colours. As something happens, the magic of watercolour sometimes makes these odd mixtures and colours and tones just by the very nature of its the way it is. So I'm trying to put a bit of colour into in between these columns now. There's some white columns which are holding it up, the roof of this building, and I try to preserve those using the white to represent the columns as they were white. So I'm just marking in here. You can see the cottages the other side, a whole row of houses through this market structure. Trying to leave spaces for the windows, which I'll dab in later, different colours. I'm using a number 8 round wash Daleroni there, pointed wash. It holds a lot of water, but it's got quite a little point to it which you can use to give you some more detail. Now I'm putting in the little lock-up, little conical building, trying to get the roof structure there. There's a house behind it, so you'll see that going in a moment. But you'll notice that at the end of the video, when we review it and we look back, you'll see this lock-up, this little structure where they used to put the village drunks or criminals or whatever you spend a few days to cool off. Anyway, I've placed it where it is at the moment. It's not quite in the right place. I think it's a bit too high. I don't know why I did that. Made a mistake following my sketch, but I was able to erase it and replace it. I washed it out when I got home, but you can do this if you've got good quality paper. I said this is Langton's £140 wash paper, so you can lift out your errors if you do it relatively soon. Just putting some different tones into this little lock-up. And this is where I make the mistake by putting this roof line too high.
As it comes down further, yes, run it down here. Got the tree in front of it there. And this is slaty over here. It's a number of cottages all linked together. Let's leave that for the moment. Let's have a look. Put in some more details later. This is just a rough blocking in, really. Let's get a bit of red into that roof here. There's lots of reddish tiles, mottled collection of tiles. This colour I could perhaps drop in a little on these chimneys. They're a red brick, some terracotta colour, a little bit of red in them. Excuse me. Right, let's got a chimney there.
Well, I'm continuing to put some of the roof structures in. Had to detach the audio again, too much wind noise. But you see the tile roof of this little market. It's beautiful tiles, all different colours, fairly small tiles. So I'm trying to create some texture by dabbing in some burnt umber, little few blues perhaps, just something to create give us some idea. I mean, it is, you could say, the focal point of this painting. So it's a rather pretty building, so you've got to try and make the best of it if you can. So this texture of this paper being rough, it's got some tooth to it. So you'll notice that as the brush goes over it, it catches on the surface somewhat, so you get a rather mottled effect, which is one of the advantages of using rough
under the eaves
paper.
Soft and a lot darker. So let's
Trying to put some roof lines in now, the eaves. You always get some shadow under the eaves. This is the lock-up again. It's conical in shape, so I'm trying to give a little bit of shading to one side so it looks more round. And saying there's the big house behind, big thatch. But as I said, I moved that later, just too high, the roof line. Black door in the middle of the lock-up there. mixing up some green now. I think we're probably going to put in the grass in the foreground. Bit of yellow ochre going in there. There's a little pathway to my right, so I'm just marking out with the grass, leaving the white there, which we'll put in later. Just sweeping in a general wash now with a mixture of greens, but you'll see later we put in different dabs of green to give us some texture. And in the bottom of the tree there we've got clumps of daffodils, so I put those in a bit later. You see, it suddenly anchors your buildings down when you put the foreground in. Making a little browny colour now, yes, for the little walkway, little path that goes in front of the market there. It's just a mixture of some sort of a dab of red with some burnt umber. Will give you something that represents the pathway. Trying to show a little bit more clearly the edges of our path. A bit of ochre, a bit of blue leaf green going in there. Yes, I'm just doing a few dabs of different greens on our foreground. Just flick the brush up a little bit to create something of a texture. You can do this with the edge of a brush, various brushes. I'm doing it with my round pointed wash, but you could do that with a flat brush, sort of 1/2 inch flat, and then just flick it up to show some grasses. But as I say, there's more than one way of killing a cat. Just find what works for you. Now I'm going to my number 8 Dara Rowney. This is one of my favourite brushes. It's got quite a point to it, and a bit of length, and there's a bit of spring to it, so you can do a lot with it. Some umber and some blue, some darker bit of green in that bluey, greeny colour. Greens and browns and greys. So this is just my first wash in with it, really, just to give me a broad outline. You can get more detailed later. A little darker to the bottom, of course, because you haven't got so much light shining on it, so it's always going to be darker or shaded. It's worth remembering when you do a tree. Generally they have darker elements at the bottom. Certainly if you've got a canopy of leaves over them. We don't have it in this case because it's just early spring. This tree had so many gnarly bits on, great lumps of, well, I guess it's been pruned, little scars, great knobbly bits coming out. I'm trying to get some of that. Just putting in some of the main boughs of these trees, but I come in later with a small brush and try and define them a little better. I'm trying to keep these boughs representative of what I'm actually looking at, trying not to be generic, so I take a glance up at the trees and try and get their main shapes. So easy just to generically throw in the branches, but each tree has its own little characteristics, so you've got to try and do that. As I say, this is just a mapping in of the main boughs. I've got several big trees here. We've got one, yes, we've got a couple behind the market, obstructed a little by the building. They're certainly projecting into our sky here. keep the trees that are close to me somewhat darker and with more intense colour, which is usually the case, and a little less vivid in the distance, but there's no chance to see greatly into the distance here. This about a few hundred yards, this square, just slightly less intense than one behind it, or market structure here. Trying here to define the market, try and put a few things in there to help define the shape. This is the big tree on our left. Mixture of blues and browns and umber. You want to avoid using black, straight black. It's can kill your picture. So make your own darks, which is what I do here. It's just a blending of my own colours. You can make it in various ways with blues and umbras and greys or even reds. It depends. This is the nature. If you use your own palette, you can create your own unique colours. Perhaps go and have a little look down there.
Do, and although it's gone behind a cloud,
Yes.
because this is an ancient market,
Right.
this gets wonderful sunlight
Yes.
all morning till about now, and in the evening all the descendants of crows go on the top of these
Do they?
and enjoy the west sunset.
Okay.
Nice to meet you. I'm a Scottish name. I'm Shuna.
You're tuna.
Shuna.
Are you?
Shuna.
I'm Paul. Eat it.
Cheers, Paul.
Bye-bye. Now I've got to put in some finer branches, I think, at some stage. I think I can still put off some of these knobbly bits. These trees have, they seem to project out the sides as well. Set against the brighter sky. I'll put a few more marks in to help show our path, I think. Helps the eye come in sometimes to the scene. And
wee bit of tree still here, projecting into our scene, so I could put some of that, I think.
And I'm doing some more on the tree on the near side. I've had to detach the audio, again, too much wind. It's nice to get the ambient sound of the birds, and sometimes around here you get geese near Harold Park and the bird song, but if you get too much wind noise it defeats the objective of capturing the scene and all the senses. The visual is what you do, of course, but you emphasize by the sound. That's the joy of working in the open air. But I think the wind noise takes the edge off a little bit. I think I have to get a wind protected mic. I'm sure it will do a better job. I'm mixing up a little red there and some neutral tones to try and give some more definition to our market. This is the underside of the ceiling that I'm doing now, because I'm sitting low on a stool so I can see up into the ceiling of this structure, so I have to try and record that. A few little pieces on the roof here. It's quite elaborate actually, so I try and to create some of that, but I want to try and keep those whites because it was white creamy structure, so I'm using the white of the paper to do that for me, preserve them, which is what you try to do with watercolour. Allow the white of the paper to help you with your lights. At the foot of these little pillars, they've got some reinforcing structures there, concrete and what have you. So I'm trying to mark those in a little bit. A few straight lines always help in anything architectural, so if you can try and introduce them, it helps the building read a little bit better. That's the pillar on the far side there, so just a little mark down which help make it look a bit more solid, because you get a light and a dark side. See, I'm doing just to the left of that pillar there earlier. The light, I think, is coming from the right. So you should try and put a shadow side to the left of these columns or left of these structures. Trying to emphasize the lights and the darks, which is really necessary in watercolour to help give it some depth. The roof line of that building set behind the lockup. The roof line, the cottages behind here. Chimneys. It's about time I put in the windows, help the building read. The doors, a few marks just to emphasize the cottage. Little doors here. The windows. Little windows tucked under the eaves. Cottage windows quite small. You can see the line of cottages through the market. I'm trying to hint at that. A few marks. Again, putting the roof lines, emphasizing them, helps you read. A few marks on the thatch there, varying the tones. You need lots of contrast in watercolour, lights and darks. It's the terracotta, or the bricks I should say, chimney, so I put a few dark sides on it, shadow side. Bit of umber there. Oh yes, I've got a bench coming in here. Trying to sharpen up some of those verticals, help it read. A few little marks here and there. Window just behind there, just behind that tree, the doorways. When I arrived at paint here, there was a whole gaggle of school children here, teenagers on this bench. I did contemplate putting in a few, but I thought, no, I got enough to do without trying to capture any figures. It's a good idea to put some figures in some building, in some scenes, because it gives a sense of scale, but I do put in some later, just in the distance, but Certainly I'm not going to tackle a full-scale figure in the foreground anyway. I think we've got quite a lot of interest going on in this scene. Try to sharpen up some of these columns, try to give a straight edge to some of them so they look more real there. Shadow under the chair. It's always a good idea to do that. Helps ground it. Yes, I haven't put in the my top structure. As I say, it's a very, very pretty little building. Got a little conical shape there, and we've got the supported on columns as well. I'm going to try and record there. Using the white of the sky there, and just a few lines, and I think you see our columns appear using the white of the paper to create that form for us. Unlike oil painting, of course, you would just put some nice thick white titanium and you could drop that in anywhere, but you have to be a little bit circumspect with how you do it in watercolour. Got to use the white of the paper to give you those white structures. Crimson alizarin here. Ultramarine makes a nice little purple. I think I'm making a shadow colour now. Nice shadowy colour, making a little puddle, because the sun is coming from the right and this big tree is casting a shadow all across the green there. Make sure your shadow goes right up to the base of your tree as well. Try to represent some of the main boughs, casting some shadow, fairly soft edged though, because it was sort of not extremely bright, but just a hint of a shadow there. I'm looking for a rigger here. Yes, a small little brush I've got. Yes, some umber there mixed with that purpley red. I think I want to put a few more branches and texture into our tree. It's not coming out so easy on the camera, I notice here, but they were fairly small branches, sort of filigree across the sky in front of me. So yes, some of the thicker paint mixtures I notice are showing there. But you have this rigor, it's got a bit of spring to it, so you get a degree of randomness, which is what you want. A sort of higgledy-piggledy nature of the branches. Yes, it was a pity there was so much wind blowing. There were also some geese flew over, some bird song. but I think it's better we do the voiceover rather than you listen to too much rumbling. Yes, with the rigger, you obviously can do some detail now. Sharpen up on this architectural feature. Nice sharp edge to it. Fine detail. Yes, you don't have to work in one area at a time and go left to right. Some people do that, but I move around, my style is to move around as you see things. And so I was using now to put a bit more detail into my chimneys there. The chimney pots, quite a lot of, you can put endless detail in these. It depends on your style and what you like to do. Do too much detail and it's actually counterproductive. Detracts from the freshness and the spontaneity. So you've got to get that balance right, and that's always, you wonder, should I do some more, should I do less? But by giving suggestions of things, the viewer does some work. They see things, they add things, and it's a nice process. And you just hint at it, and the eye fills in on its experience and differences. So this is a little technique that painters often use, certainly watercolour. The realist painters, of course, put every jot and tittle in, and if that's what they want to do, and it's very skilled, beautiful work sometimes, but the more impressionistic style is to have as much detail as you can to make the picture read. I'm putting in some cables here. They have lights, a string of lights wrapped around that building. Maybe they're left over from Christmas, or maybe they leave them up all year. Just a hint at the windows. some of these pillars have a little wooden structure support up against each column. Just trying to hint at them there where you can see them. Making up some green here. I want to try and vary the greens. I think, yes, we have some daffodils at the base of these trees. A few clumps on the green generally, but quite sparse. They were just there's a little clump, one clump in front of me, and then at the base of the trees they had a bed as well. So I'm trying to streak in a few suggestions on this far tree. There were some there, and right in front of me, just to my left here, the base of this tree, a few more clumps. So trying to get a bluey green structure for these daffodils. Using the rigger to just put a few textural details in the tree as well. I noticed there are greens and greys on the bark of these trees. A few clumps on that path up by the lockup. You see I'm putting the greens there against a lighter colour, a darker green against the light, using that to emphasise the form. Putting a bit of different greens onto our grass as well, a general textural, a bit of a dry brush, thicker paint, but not too much water, and then just drag it across the surface to try and create some idea of tufts of grass growing. Just scrumble it across. Still trying to put a few more fine twigs in. Oh yes, I'm getting some yellow now, vivid cadmium yellow for daffodils. Trying to get a little drop in there, try and get it as thick as I can so we can see it. As I said, it's going to dry 50% lighter, so you have to try and thicken up on it if you can. Little dabs here and there, a few clumps, a few in front of that house as well. Had some in the foreground here, just where I'm sitting on my little stool. Drop a few in, a few blobs there, here and there. Here I'm putting in a little more starting to put in a little more detail in the foreground. Little marks here and there. I think I'm trying to put a bit of yellow into these bulbs hanging from that little string of cable that I put around the market roof there. Yes, more detail going into the foreground here. Little marks here and there. I think I'm trying to put some yellow in these daffodils. Nice thick. Get a bit of green there. That's very lurid, isn't it? Won't do. Bit of blue, like that.
Are you going to be in your way?
No problem. No.
Okay.
noticed I haven't got the weathercock up yet. I need to do that. Nice little feature there. It's got a ball there. Line up that. Another ball up here. Have we done enough? I think we probably have. Much as I can do comfortably without overdoing it. Try and put some more knobbly bits perhaps in these little trees. Lumps on the side. Let's see how I've got that right. put some person in here, a little shape, helps give a bit of scale. Now we've got a little shape there. Where else should we put somebody? Let's put somebody here. Warming up a little bit. There was a bit of sun coming. Darken up this jacket. This person here. Somebody in here too. Sitting down. Just putting a bit of darker colour into this base of this tree. Few more marks in the boughs of the tree there with my rigger, trying to create some fine branches. Just putting a little bit more detail into the top of the market square there with my rigger, sharpen up on some of the edges. And our wind vane, north, south, east and west. Try and keep that. Well, here's my final rendition. I've had to make some corrections since I was out in the field. The little lock-up to the right was a little out of alignment, so I've redone that. But on balance, I'm quite happy with it, really. It's kept some brightness to it, and I've got a nice balance of light and darks, which is so important. And I've kept the white of the market, those pillars. This is just the white paper, so that helps give a little sparkle to it.